In the 20th century, the United States has defeated fascism, Nazism, and communism. Now a different threat challenges our world: radical Islamic terrorism. We cannot let this evil continue. Nor can we let the hateful ideology of radical Islam, its oppression of women, gays, children, and non-believers be allowed to reside or spread within our own countries. But we will not, remember this, defeat it with closed eyes or silenced voices. Anyone who cannot condemn the hatred, oppression, and violence of radical Islam lacks the moral clarity to serve as our president.
It's time for Radical Truth with Tony Gurley.
Has there been a Muslim ban, and should there be one? Those are the questions we are answering in this episode of Radical Truth. And when we ask, should there be one, we need to ask that from both a political as well as an evangelistic perspective. Now, there are a couple of resources I want to recommend to you right off the bat. The first one is a book called Stealth Invasion: Muslim Conquest Through Immigration and Resettlement Jihad. This is by Leo Hohmann, last name Hohmann. If you go to leohohmann.com and get the book that way, that is the best way that you can support Leo and his important work. But in this book, you will learn what's been happening the last few decades, as well as especially in the last 5 years or so, in regards to mass migration and also the refugee, quote-unquote, situation. And this goes into the stories around the United States of what is happening that is not talked about in the mainstream media. Again, Stealth Invasion: Muslim Conquest Through Immigration and Resettlement Jihad. And a second book that you want to get, and this one you can go ahead and pick up on Amazon or wherever you buy books, Modern Day Trojan Horse: Al-Hijra, the Islamic Doctrine of Immigration. And in this book, Solomon gets more into the primary sources themselves, quoting the Quran, quoting the Hadith, that is the narrations, the commands of Muhammad himself, and he will get into the mindset and use different Islamic terms of why this is taking place. Now, people are usually somewhat familiar with the 5 pillars of Islam. If you are not, that is the Shahada. This is the Islamic creed that a person says to become a Muslim. The Salat, that is the 5 daily prayers. Psalm, which is fasting during the month of Ramadan. Zakat, which is the almsgiving, the 2.5% of a Muslim's complete worth, not just their income, but all their income plus holdings. And then the Hajj, which is the trip to Mecca that a Muslim is supposed to make sometime in their life. But Muhammad also gave 5 charges to his followers, and this is recorded in the Hadith. He says, "I charge you with 5 of what Allah has charged me with: to assemble, to listen, to obey, to immigrate, and to wage jihad for the sake of Allah." Now, to assemble, this is referring to meeting in the mosque. That is why you see a continual building of mosques throughout the West, especially in Europe, but also here in the United States, because even if they are built in an area where there aren't a ton of Muslims currently, the goal is to finally fill those mosques someday because of the converts to Islam here in the West, as well as all the immigrants who are coming to the West. We also have listen. That is the second thing that he talked about. This is listening to and submitting to the authority of the Quran and the Sunnah. The Sunnah is the example of Muhammad himself, and that is again found in the Hadith and also the Sirah, which is the biographies of Muhammad. Third is to obey, and this is of course again obeying the Quran, but also obeying the authority of the imams and the ulama, the Islamic scholars throughout the world. Fourth is to immigrate. So this is not just something that happened in the life of Muhammad himself when he immigrated from Mecca to Yathrib, which is now known as Medina, but it was an actual command to his followers. And you will find that in a number of chapters in the Quran. Chapter 2, verse 218, chapter 8, verses 72, 74, 75, chapter 9, verse 20, and also chapter 16, verses 41 and 110. Those are just a few of the areas where you actually find the word immigrate in the verses, who have immigrated and have striven hard for the sake of Allah. Now, number 5 is waging jihad. And of course, in the life of Muhammad and his successors, that usually referred to physical fighting. However, it's important to understand that jihad is technically anything that will further the cause of Islam. So, building mosques in the West, that is jihad. Pushing for more and more stores to start carrying and selling halal food, that is jihad. Building madrasas or schools for to teach children about Islam, to teach Arabic, which is of course the prized language of Islam and Muhammad himself, and that's the language that supposedly everyone's going to be speaking in paradise, etc. That is a form of jihad. Basically, anything that sheds a good light on or spotlights Islam is jihad. Anything that furthers it in the West. Now, the hijrah is basically referring to Muslims leaving the Islamic parts of the world for the non-Islamic parts of the world, but not just to go there and be westernized. It's the exact opposite. The goal is to Islamize the West, and that's why only Muslims who know Islam according to Muhammad and know that it is their goal to help Islamize the West are the ones who are supposed to go. And it says in Solomon's book here, hijrah ceases only when a place, a community, or a country has been won over. So the goal is Islamization of the entire world, to have the entire world under Islamic law. This is why immigration is commanded. How else can the whole world become Islamized if it's not right now? It becomes Islamized by bringing migrants and now refugees, quote unquote, to the western parts of the world for a bigger agenda. Solomon says in his book here, for with the hijrah came the establishment of the new Muslim community, and with the community came the need for new legislation, then the ushering in of an Islamic state, followed by the principles of war and peace, courts, taxation, treaties with non-Muslims, the conduct of Muslims, and the legislation of how to run their daily lives. So he gets deep into the doctrine of hijrah in his book here, again by Sam Solomon. He also talks about Tamkeen and Idad, which is the empowerment of Muslims and what they're doing in the West, and also preparation. Now, if you look at the countries throughout the world and the Muslim population, if you're watching the video of this show, you can see the map, which is also shown in Lights Out When Islam Rules America. But the darker the green, the higher the Muslim population. So they are moving from the Islamic parts of the world to the non-Islamic parts of the world, or the parts of the world that have less Muslims, again, for the cause of Allah, ultimately. But the preparation also refers to what the Muslim Brotherhood is doing. Because when the Ottoman Empire fell in 1924, it was just 4 years later when the Muslim Brotherhood was created by Hassan al-Banna. And at the bottom of the Muslim Brotherhood logo, you see the word prepare. And this isn't just referring to military preparation or fighting weapons. It's also referring to preparing a society or preparing a host country to be open to Islam and to be Islamized. So you will find that when Islamization is taking place, you'll see that the Islamists, and again, these are Muslims who specifically are involved in the political aspects of Islam, and that is why we need to talk about this from a political perspective, are continually pushing for more rights, quote unquote, and accommodations for Muslims. It's all for the cause of Islamization. Immigration happens along the way, but more Muslims equals more establishment equals more influence, and more influence equals the ultimate goal of more takeover. And there's even a quote in here that Sam Solomon gives, and this was actually a Turkish journalist, and he's quoted in a German newspaper. He says, "You Germans think that we Turks are coming to Germany only seeking employment and to gather the crumbs of your money. No, we are coming here to take over your country and to be established in it, and then to build what we see appropriate, and all that with your approval and according to your laws." In other words, just as the Muslim Brotherhood documents have said, by their own hands, using our own laws and liberties against us, saying, hey, you have freedom of religion, you have freedom of speech, you have this, this, and this. So they will use those freedoms and rights to their advantage for the goal of Islamization. And when we come back after the short break, we're going to get more into this Muslim ban, quote unquote, that people have called it. And when I say people have called it that, that's usually referring to the Islamists who are using this Muslim ban to attack everyone in the West who supports it, including the president himself, of course. We'll get right to that right after this.
Hi, I'm Joe Carey with Radical Truth Ministry, helping Christians reach Muslims with the gospel. There are certain things we need to be aware of when talking with Muslims. I call them the do's and don'ts of Muslim evangelism. Don't assume your Muslim friend will understand the term Christianity. You'll need to explain what it means to be a Christian. Why? Since Islam doesn't separate the culture from the religion, they apply the same thinking to Americans and Christianity. Since it is widely believed the United States is a Christian nation, Muslims look to our culture to see what Christianity produces. One of the leading nations in the distribution of pornography, rampant drug abuse, moral decay, and entertainment in society in general. Muslims believe these are the results of Christianity. You'll need to help your Muslim friend understand these have nothing to do with Christianity. Show them where Jesus spoke against these and where the Bible condemns this behavior. Model true Christianity for them. You can find out more about sharing with Muslims at our website at radicaltruth.net. I'm Joe Carey for Radical Truth Ministry.
Radical Truth Media presents Understanding Islam, now available on a 5-DVD set and resource disc. 20 hours of apologetics training covering Introduction to Apologetics to Islam, the Christian and the Great Commission, Islam 101, Basic Beliefs and Practices, Christianity and Islam's Theological Differences, Jihad and Muhammad, the authority of the Bible versus the Quran, Women under Islam, Answering Objections, Sharing the Gospel with Muslims, Do's and Don'ts of Muslim Evangelism. This is one of the very best so far, especially in the way the material is organized, the relevance, and the clear presentation of the Islamic worldview and mindset. Radical Truth presents Understanding Islam, featuring Joe Carey, founder of Radical Truth. For more information, visit www.radicaltruth.net. As a 501c3 Christian ministry, Radical Truth is dependent upon God to provide our monthly financial support, and He provides through people like you who realize the need for this vital work. Your regular prayers and monthly financial gifts allow us to continue our full-time effort to equip the body of Christ with the training necessary to effectively engage Muslims with the gospel of Jesus Christ. At Radical Truth, we proclaim the truth, share the gospel, and expose Islam. Please partner with us by visiting radicaltruth.net and making a tax-deductible donation. That's radicaltruth.net.
Paul writes to Timothy, he says in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 25 and 26, he says, "Gently instruct those who oppose the truth. Perhaps God will change those people's hearts and they will learn the truth. Then they will come to their senses and escape from the devil's trap, for they have been held captive by him to do whatever he wants." See, Muslims are being held captive by the enemy of this world, by the enemy of God. And we're the only ones that can bring them the message that will set them free.
This is Radical Truth with Tony Gurley.
Has there been a Muslim ban, and should there be one? Those are the questions we are answering in this segment. Before the break, we talked about the Orthodox Islamic doctrine of al-Hijra, the purposeful migration of Muslims from Islamic parts of the world to the non-Islamic parts of the world. I recommended to you a couple of books, and I'm also now recommending you a 4-video series that you should watch, and this is found on my BitChute channel, bitchute.com/Tony Gurley, and you can find a playlist of 4 videos, and this playlist is called False Identity Undercover Videos. This is an Israeli documentary, and it's an Orthodox Jew who is fluent in Arabic and went undercover as a Muslim, quote-unquote, to interview and expose the Islamists and their plan for the Islamization of America and Europe. Now, quite a chunk of all 4 videos have subtitles because he's either speaking Arabic to people, and then you have the English translation on the bottom, or in the 2 videos on America, this is a 2-part series on America, one video on France and 1 video on West Germany and Turkey. In the 2 America videos, he is speaking English to English speakers, but then it has Hebrew subtitles on the bottom. Because again, this was an Israeli documentary. Now, there's 4 videos that will cause people's eyes to open and their jaws to drop. So feel free to share that with people, because that will be an undercover video exposing what is happening in America and the West. Now, moving on to the Muslim ban, quote-unquote, it's technically a travel ban, and this list that was first put out a couple of years ago had a couple more countries on there, but they were shortly later removed. The ones that remained were Iran, Syria, Libya, Yemen, Somalia, Venezuela, and North Korea. Now, most people know that Venezuela and North Korea don't have nearly as many Muslims as Iran, Syria, Libya, Yemen, and Somalia. Nevertheless, is this actually a Muslim ban? Because that is what the Islamists are calling it. That is what they are calling it in order to attack the President of the United States, as well as anyone in America or the West who's against mass migration and a ton of refugees, quote-unquote. But nevertheless, we need to determine if this actually is a Muslim ban. And how do we know that? We can do one simple thing, and that is compare the countries on the travel ban list to the countries with the most Muslims in the world list. Because what countries are on that second list? It is India, Egypt, Nigeria, Pakistan, Indonesia, and Bangladesh. Now, a couple of years ago, none of these countries that have the most Muslims in the world were on the travel ban list. And even about 6 months ago, in January of 2020, when more countries were added to the travel ban list, and yes, Nigeria was added, as well as Sudan, Eritrea, Tanzania, Myanmar, and Kyrgyzstan, we still have to ask, well, is this a Muslim ban? Because Nigeria, you're talking 103 million Muslims were now added to the travel ban list. But if we add up all of the Muslims in Iran, Syria, Libya, Yemen, Somalia, Venezuela, North Korea, Sudan, Eritrea, Nigeria, Tanzania, Myanmar, and Kyrgyzstan. How many Muslims do we have? And if we add up the Muslims in India, Egypt, Pakistan, Indonesia, and Bangladesh, how many Muslims do we have? Because that will help us determine if this is actually a Muslim ban. And here are the numbers, folks. 13 countries on the travel ban list, 316.5 million Muslims. 5 countries on the most, or the countries with the most Muslims in the world list, 870.4 million Muslims. And again, that is with Nigeria added over. If it hadn't been added over, you're talking over 1 billion Muslims not on the travel ban list. And at that point, you'd have roughly 208 or so, maybe 210 million who were on the travel ban list. So numbers-wise, it doesn't add up. It's not accurate or intellectually honest to call it a Muslim ban. And if we look at the actual reasoning that was given for the 13 countries that are on the travel ban list, this is what they were. Number 1, terrorist activity. Number 2, a failure of the countries to properly document their own travelers. And 3, an insufficient effort to cooperate and share information with U.S. authorities. Those were the determining factors of the 13 countries on the travel ban list. Again, many, many more Muslims have not been banned, quote unquote, if we look at the countries with the most Muslims in the world. Now, here's a determining factor. Muhammad said, this is recorded in Sahih al-Bukhari, which is the most revered collection of the narrations of Muhammad. He said, I have been made victorious through terror. So if the perfect man and perfect Muslim, quote unquote, according to Islam, has been made victorious through terror, then why should we be surprised when his most devout followers try to emulate him and are involved in terrorist activity as well? And terrorist activity was the number one reason for the travel ban list of countries. So, has a Muslim ban taken place? No, it has not, based on the numbers, and no, it has not, based on the reasoning. Because if any country fell under those reasons of terrorist activity, failure to cooperate with U.S. authorities, and failure to properly document their own travelers, that would get them added to the travel ban list as well. So, to answer that question, has there been one? No. Now, when it comes to should there be one, well, you might be thinking based on the first segment and the Islamic doctrine of al-Hijra, well, in that sense, from that specific political Islamic perspective, then you might be thinking, yeah, that there should be one. Now, how about from an evangelistic perspective? Because how can Christians reach Muslims with the gospel? And of course, the gospel is the ultimate solution to Islam. How can we reach them? And what's the easiest way to reach Muslims? Because if we're dependent upon Christians leaving the West to go to Islamic countries in order to reach Muslims, we're not going to be nearly as effective or have nearly as many Christians reaching Muslims as we can have here in the West. Now, a number of years ago, a news story came out. It said 2 men kept from boarding U.S. plane after speaking Arabic. And it was shortly after that came out that I had made a post on Facebook, back before I was banned on Facebook. And it was a story of something that had happened to me, because I had written on there, I had 3 plane flights last Saturday. On my second one, I had the aisle seats, and there were 2 empty seats next to me. Then, shortly before the plane took off, a Middle Eastern-looking man and woman came to my aisle and motioned that the seats next to me were theirs. I stood up and walked into the aisle so that they could get past me and sit down. As I did that, I heard them speaking Arabic. I helped the woman put an item into the overhead bin, and they sat down and I sat down. As I read a book, they continued to speak Arabic for about 10 minutes or so, and then I attempted to start a conversation to see if they spoke English. The woman did not, but the man did. I learned that he and his wife were from Iraq, that he has lived in the U.S. for quite a few years, but she just got here. I asked him a number of questions about Iraq and what it was like growing up there. Then he told me that he and his wife are Christians, quote-unquote. So I swung the conversation to the Bible. He would speak English to me and then Arabic to his wife. I had my Bible in my hands and she had an Arabic Bible app on her phone. Turns out, he said they didn't believe in the Trinity, or that Jesus is the eternal Son of God incarnate. So we talked about it for about an hour and a half or so. Every few minutes he would interpret what I said to his wife, and she would skip around to different verses in her Arabic Bible. Near the end of the conversation, the man said he would like to talk more, so we exchanged contact information. After that, I gave them an English-Arabic copy of Josh McDowell's More Than a Carpenter, which a friend of mine just happened to give me right before I drove to the airport. So that was obviously a divine appointment that God used me as his instrument to reach these people and plant seeds of truth. Talked about the Trinity for an hour and a half or so. She was looking at a Bible app in Arabic on her phone. And folks, I wasn't in an Islamic country. They were in America. And it was because they were in America that I was easily able to talk with them, to plant seeds with them. And that is the ultimate goal to the lie of Islam, is the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. And that's why we need to get it to all people, but of course all Muslims. You can't get a larger mission field than 1.6 billion people. That's why we want you to check out radicaltruth.net, which is of course our website. We have a ton of information there. And we also have resources that will soon be added to the website as well. After the last episode, we already had people asking for these resources. Again, we have Lights Out, the Muslim Brotherhood, and Unveiling the Facts of Sharia all on one DVD. Conveniently on one DVD. We also have a 20-hour Apologetics to Islam video series available on DVD, also available on a flash drive. So if you're interested in these resources, please email us. We do have a suggested donation to cover the cost of the materials, and it also includes shipping and handling. But if you're interested in these resources, please email us because we would love to get these to you. And folks, we can't do this on our own. We do need your help in reaching people with the gospel. All Christians should be reaching out to people around them. And please support us and allow us to continue to do this vital work for God's glory. And we hope this has been a blessing to you. Use this material to reach the Muslims around you and educate other people as well. And we will talk with you next time on Radical Truth.